President Donald Trump stepped into a Navy hospital to visit wounded soldiers. It was supposed to be a routine presidential stop: handshakes, photos, smiles for the press. Trump was known for his booming presence, his quick remarks, and his ability to turn any moment into a headline. But on this day, something entirely different happened. Something no one expected. The hospital's halls carried the weight of sacrifice. Every bed held a story of bravery, of pain, of lives forever changed in the line of duty. Staff members guided Trump through the ward as cameras followed closely, ready to capture every handshake and every salute. Reporters scribbled in their notebooks, preparing for sound bites that might become tomorrow's headlines. At first, the visit unfolded as expected. Trump shook hands, thanked the service members, and posed for photos. But then he stopped at one particular bed. A young Navy SEAL, scarred from battle, sat upright despite his injuries. His presence alone commanded respect. When Trump leaned closer, the soldier greeted him with steady eyes and a firm, "Mr. President, thank you for coming." The room stilled. Everyone waited for Trump's usual strong response. But what happened next wasn't about Trump's words, it was about the soldiers. With calm strength, the SEAL spoke about sacrifice not his own, but that of the families left behind. The children who would grow up without parents, the spouses who would carry the heavy weight of loss. He reminded Trump and everyone in the room that while soldiers sign up for the risks, their families never truly do. Those words struck deeper than anyone anticipated. For the first time, Trump Hofen, the loudest voice in any room, was silent. His shoulders lowered, his expression softened, and the cameras caught a side of him rarely seen. It wasn't a debate. It wasn't politics. It was humanitarian and undeniable. Witnesses later described it as one of the most emotional moments of Trump's presidency. A soldier, broken in body but unshaken in spirit, had shifted the spotlight. In that room, titles and power didn't matter. What mattered were the unspoken costs of war and the quiet reminder that some sacrifices can never be repaid. The visit took place inside Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, a place often called the beating heart of America's military care. For decades, it had been the destination where heroes came not only to heal, but to rebuild their lives after unthinkable sacrifices. The halls carried the faint scent of medicine mixed with quiet determination. Rows of beds stretched across large recovery rooms, each one telling its own story. 4 stands clicked softly. Monitors beeped steadily. And the quiet hum of machines filled the background sounds that had become the daily rhythm of those who lived there. Many of the men and women inside, these walls bore visible marks of war-missing limbs, bandaged wounds, and scars etched permanently on their faces and bodies. Others carried invisible scars that no machine could monitor. Every patient was a living reminder of the price paid for freedom. When Trump entered, he brought his familiar energy. He moved with confidence, shaking hands firmly, giving salutes to men and women who had once stood proudly in uniform. He thanked them for their service, offered encouraging words, and exchanged smiles. Photographers captured each moment, flashes popping as if trying to preserve the importance of the day. Staff members stood nearby, watching with pride as their commander-in-chief acknowledged the warriors they cared for daily at first. Everything felt like a typical presidential visit, formal, respectful, and full of practiced words. But then, Trump's pace slowed as he approached one particular bed. Something about the soldier lying there seemed to draw his full attention. The young man was a Navy SEAL, no older than 30. His body told the story of battle. One leg was gone, the space where it had been now covered with a clean white bandage. Scars ran across his face and arms, deep reminders of an explosion he had survived overseas. Yet despite his injuries, he sat upright, his posture strong. His eyes were sharp, steady, and filled with determination. When Trump leaned closer, the soldier spoke. His voice wasn't weak or uncertain, it was firm, steady, and commanding respect. "Mr. President," he said, "thank you for coming." Those simple words, spoken with such strength, caught Trump's full attention. Breaking from the routine, he pulled up a chair beside the bed. He leaned forward, lowering his voice, and asked softly, "Son, how are you holding up?" And in that moment, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. The soldier took a deep breath before answering. The entire room seemed to lean in closer. His voice was calm, almost gentle, yet it carried a weight that no one could ignore. Every syllable seemed to press against the walls of the hospital room, demanding to be heard. "Sir," he began, his tone steady, "I'm not worried about myself. I signed up knowing the risks. I knew what it meant to wear this uniform." There was no self-pity, no bitterness in his words. Instead, his voice held the quiet strength of someone who had made peace with his own sacrifice. But then his eyes grew sharper, and his tone shifted to something deeper. "What I worry about," he continued, "are the families back home, the kids who grow up without their moms or dads, the wives who get that knock on the door. We chose this life, but they didn't. They're the ones who carry the heaviest burden. I just want you to remember them in every decision you make." The room froze. It was as if time itself had paused. The shuffle of staff in the hallway faded. Reporters, who moments earlier were scribbling furiously, stopped mid-sentence. Even the cameras, which had been snapping non-stop, seemed to fall quiet. And there sat Donald Trump, known for his quick responses, his fiery energy, his refusal to let silence fill a room. Yet here, in front of this young Navy SEAL, he said nothing. His hands rested gently on the soldier's bed. His face, often filled with confidence and command, softened in a way few had ever seen before. For the first time in a long time, Trump looked stunned. The soldier's words weren't about politics. They weren't about medals, glory, or recognition. They were about something far greater, the invisible sacrifices that often go unnoticed. The empty chairs at dinner tables, the birthdays missed. The knock on the door that shatters a family's world. It was a reminder that war doesn't end when the battlefield grows quiet. It follows families home, shaping their lives in ways most Americans will never fully see. And in that moment, with a single statement, the young SEAL shifted the focus from himself to all those silent sacrifices that don't make headlines but are just as real. For a few long seconds, Trump didn't respond. The room, usually filled with the buzz of cameras and the shuffling of aides, seemed to fall into absolute stillness. His face, often firm and commanding, softened noticeably. His shoulders, usually squared with confidence, lowered ever so slightly, as though the weight of the soldier's words had pressed upon him. Those watching described the change as striking Donald Trump, the man who had built a reputation on never pausing, never backing down, was sitting in silence, truly absorbing what had just been said. Witnesses later recalled how his eyes fixed on the young Navy SEAL, not with pity, but with something different: respect, humility, and perhaps even a quiet sense of guilt. In that moment, the power dynamics of the room shifted. Trump wasn't the commanding figure towering over a wounded soldier. Instead, he looked like a leader confronted with the raw truth of sacrifice. Stripped of politics and applause, finally, after what felt like an eternity, Trump leaned closer and spoke softly, his voice lacking its usual booming confidence. "You're right," he said. "I won't forget." Those 4 words carried more weight than any speech could. They weren't polished lines prepared by a speechwriter, nor were they designed for the cameras. They were simple, raw, and real, spoken from a man who had just been reminded of the deeper cost of every decision he made as Commander-in-Chief. It was a rare moment where Donald Trump, known for dominating every room he entered, wasn't in control. The focus had shifted completely. The soldier's words had cut through titles, politics, and power, leaving behind only the undeniable truth of sacrifice. This wasn't about the President of the United States. This wasn't about partisan divides. It was about a warrior reminding his leader of the families who quietly carry the burden of war burdens the public rarely sees. When the moment ended, Trump stood up. He didn't deliver a speech, didn't wave to the cameras, didn't turn the moment into a performance. Instead, he extended his hand and gripped the soldier's firmly. Looking him in the eyes, he said quietly, "Thank you, son. No theatrics. No grandstanding. Just a leader and a soldier, sharing a moment of respect in the silence of a hospital room." In a world where politics often overshadows humanity, this moment stood apart like a clear voice breaking through the noise. So much of what people see in the news is filled with arguments, policies, and endless debates. But here, inside a quiet hospital room, none of that mattered. It wasn't about party lines or approval ratings. It wasn't even about Donald Trump's decisions as president. It was about perspective. One soldier, scarred by battle in ways most people could never imagine, had the chance to speak to the most powerful man in the country. He could have talked about his pain, his struggles, or his sacrifices. Yet he chose something far more selfless. He shifted the focus away from himself and spoke for the ones who often remain unseen, the families. The children left behind when a parent deploys.
The spouses who wait by the phone, dreading the news they pray never comes. The parents who send their sons and daughters off to serve, never certain if they will return. For many Americans, hearing this story became a powerful reminder of what service truly means. Soldiers may fight battles on the front lines, but their families fight quiet battles every single day. They endure the sleepless nights, the long absences, the constant uncertainty, and, in the worst cases, the devastating grief of loss. Their sacrifices don't make headlines, but they are just as real and just as heavy. And for Donald Trump, a man who built his identity on strength, boldness, and dominating every stage he stood on, being left silent by a soldier's words was telling. It showed that even someone as outspoken and confident as Trump could be humbled by the raw honesty of a man who had given more than most people could ever imagine. Silence in this case wasn't weakness, it was respect. Whether someone supported Trump or opposed him, this moment revealed something larger than politics. True courage doesn't always come from leaders, speeches, or grand gestures. Sometimes it comes from a wounded soldier in a hospital bed, reminding the world of a truth that often gets overlooked. Freedom has a cost, and that cost is carried not only by those in uniform, but by every family waiting for them at home. And that is why this story continues to be told. Because in that brief, unforgettable moment, silence spoke louder than any words ever could.